Hi everyone and welcome along. Today we're going to have a go at painting some Narcissus, these miniature daffodils here. You're going to need some masking fluid because we're going to put them on a dark background. So grab your paints and let's get started. So here we have some actual Narcissus. It's so nice to be painting things from sight. So I'm going to draw a Narcissus, so you can see we've got this sort of area where it sort of crisps up, and then from there we get our single stems. So I'm going to sort of do it a little differently to how we've got it. So I think I'm going to begin with an open-faced one here. So imagine if we were sort of looking face on to one of these. So I've got a circle for the center of the flower, and then I'm gonna place in the petals. Now I'm drawing them quite fully today, so let's see, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, is that an extra little? No. Let's check one of the other ones. Yeah, there are six petaled flower. So what I find can be quite useful is to sort of draw 3 in, all sort of coming from there, and then you can tuck the other 3 in like that as well. Okay, then we've got one coming up here, and then you can sort of see that slightly bulbous bit underneath coming up behind, and this one is going to be sort of open faced to a point. It's going to be behind, so I'm going to be drawing in that sort of cup shape. We're not going to see a huge amount of the others, and we might not even see the 6th petal. I think I'll have one that comes up that way, maybe facing off in the distance. So we're just going to see the back of this one. So a bit like if we were looking at that one there, just looking off into the distance. So you can see it's got quite a wide one, and then we see obviously the central petal in the front first, and then just imagining one might sort of it unfurling downwards, just a little one there. So I'm drawing this really quite precisely because we are going to be doing some masking fluid. I'm going to do another one just sort of that's bending over a bit more, coming from behind there, and we'll have that one facing us as well, but just very on the side, so we'll see the sort of the cup shape of the middle of the flower, but we might have the petals just sort of enclosing it a little bit. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe this one like that. So we're just sort of creating all the shapes that we need to make sure get covered up by the masking fluid. And the other thing is we could always add in some leaves as well. But what I'm doing today with you is I'm really excited about creating this piece on a dark background. So what we're going to do, now I've done it, I think maybe, yeah, we'll just do another little one there, maybe have it facing away again. Maybe it's just a little bit more of a bud, so the petals aren't coming out quite so much. So I'm just always thinking about they're all coming from that central point. Okay, lovely. put that to one side for a minute. So we need some masking fluid. I've been using this a little bit more on my channel recently, just because I love to offer you new ways of doing things. So this is a tacky glue that acts, well, it is a masking fluid, so it acts like masking tape. It's quite hard to open. But it is a liquid. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose a brush that has sort of not really been good enough to be a proper watercolour brush for a while. You can see it's all really tufty and things. Because the thing is, using masking fluid on brushes does mean they do get a bit clogged up. You can get special applicators for the stuff. But what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to colour in with the masking fluid every bit of the flower that I've drawn, and that's why it's important to draw it, at least the outline, quite fully, because you need to make sure that everything that you want to be masked is masked. So then once we've done our dark background, we'll be able to peel this off, and underneath will be clear white unpainted paper ready for us to add in the lovely light bright yellow flowers. The painting has now been dried, as in the masking fluid is dry, and I've just taped it around the edge. You can see I've not sort of worried about taping it so every edge is covered, because it's just more to keep it in place. I do get asked quite a lot about whether I stretch my watercolour paper or all that kind of thing. Well, the answer is no. I don't tend to worry about it too much, because most of the time I'm not painting full watery washes across the whole page. But we'll do a quick fix on that soon, because I know it's something, along with colour theory, it's one of those things that I don't really ever feel ever got explained to me fully about watercolour paper stretching. Anyway, so we will cover that soon. What I'm doing is I'm just mixing Mars Black, and then I'm waking up some sap green in my palette as well. And I am going to put a wash of very dark colour over the top of this painting. I'm very keen to try new things this year and have you come along with me for the journey. So you can see I'm just adding that green into the black. Quite like the idea of this sort of warm greeny black colour, but I'm going to use my flathead one stroke brush. Just get that nice and clean, nice and wet, I mean. See, the colour is going to get used up so fast, so I'm just going to grab even more into the palette there. I'm painfully aware there's a crumble hair knocking around in this mix. There we go. Let's go, right. So you can see how the paint is just beading off the top of the masking fluid area, and I'm very consciously painting a sort of brush strokey, quite rough backdrop here. I don't want it to be too perfect. In fact, I think that is grand. I'm very pleased with that. You see there's a bit of puddling up here, so I could just pull a little bit of that off. So that's just a case of taking a little bit of the colour back. So I'm just gently taking it back off the page and just cleaning off my brush here. But yeah, I'm pleased with that. So we're going to let this dry 100%, and then we can peel off the masking fluid and paint the Narcissus. So this is all dried now. The paint that sort of beads up on top of the masking fluid will not soak in and will sort of stay wet on top. So you might want to dab that before you come to the point where you're going to rub out the masking fluid. So here we go. So I'm just gently using my fingers to peel and roll this up. It's a very satisfying part, and you can see it just comes away rather nicely. You have to let these things dry naturally. So this is one, if you're an impatient soul, then maybe do this, and whilst it dries you can paint something else. Go and have a look at the vast array of tutorials on my channel. So yeah, we'll get this all peeled off, and we'll still have the pencil underneath, as you can see here, so we'll be able to still have that as a guide when we start painting our flowers. So now I can start treating this like one of my regular paintings. So I've got a size 0 brush, and I've got cadmium yellow and lemon yellow both here, both woken up, and so I'm going to begin by painting in the petals, but I'm going to leave little bits of unpainted space. So in the way that I drew them, I'm going to sort of paint them so you've got sort of the 3, and then I'll leave them, paint the other 3. So what I'm doing is I'm allowing for little bits of white unpainted space coming from the middle. Doesn't matter if you sort of bleed into the middle just a tiny bit. I think the only thing I'd say to be careful about is making sure you're not sort of really labouring with the brush and putting tons of extra brush strokes in right up against the dark background, because even though it is dry, there is a chance if you sort of disturb it relentlessly that it might start to sort of smudge in to the petal. What is also rather useful when you have a dark background like this, it's amazing how that sort of brings everything sharply into focus, and you can actually do away with the amount of detail you might have put in if you were just painting on a white background. So that's quite a fun observation. So I'm just going to go around, and as everything dries, just paint in all the petals I can see in this kind of technique, and then we'll move on to the next stage. Now that the petals are largely painted in, I'm just taking a bit of cadmium yellow and dropping that in here and there, sort of from the base or the centre of the petal outwards, just to give it a little extra something. Right, whilst that dries, we can look at the stem. The stem is quite a yellowy green, so I'm going to use a combination of sap green, which is a lovely dark, rich green, and some of my green gold, which I really love as a colour, and it just lifts the sap green to become maybe a bit more grassy, a bit more what I need here. So I've got to remember that sort of from here is this kind of area. So with my size 2 brush, I'm going to paint, and I really want to try and make the most of the fact that I've got this dark background, so I'm going to use the unpainted space to create a bit of light. one way of sort of creating a nice ridged texture on the leaves and the stem that is just subtly there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a bit of sap green just on its own and use my little detail brush. It's still wet, that's fine. And just to, I might want to use my rigger brush. Let's see. Just want to get a bit of darkness in there whilst it's still bleeding and blending. The choice of brushes is largely down to you, really. So you see this little blob of white here. What I'm just going to subtly do is bring the green out. There we go. Lovely. Okay, very pleased with that. These will have been drying in the meantime. We need to get a bit more yellowy tones. I think yellow ochre will be rather useful here. So I'm just waking that up. Let's bring a bit over here. Then with my size 0 brush, I'm just going to begin by placing in a sort of dilute bit there, then just introducing some of that yellow ochre. I'm not going to see a huge amount of it. Now I'm waking up burnt sienna. And the reason I'm just waking this up now is I'm just giving that the tiniest bit of time to seep in and dry in just a little bit. And so then I can come in and do this, but it won't travel too far. Nice one. Okay, I'm now going to paint in the rest of the stems here, and I feel like the 4/10 brush is perfect for just capturing these tricky little areas with this sort of basic wash stage. That's what we're still in, really, but there is a little bit of the darker green there. You can see that I'm not too worried about things bleeding into each other. I'm being quite sort of loose, well, not loose with this, but I'm just so interested by the contrast you get from the dark background that really crisps everything up, that I'm trying to paint in just a slightly more relaxed manner. The thing is, for me, all these paintings are experiments as well. You know, I have a plan, and you know, I want to teach as clearly as I can, but also you've got to be open to surprises and discoveries along the way. There we go. Pleased with that. Now the centers of these flowers are dry, so we need some orange for the central trumpet shape. So I'm going to change my water over because it's gone a bit green and we don't want too much green in the orange. So I'm going to mix up a lovely orange. I think I'm going to add a little bit of cadmium red to my cadmium orange just to intensify it and make it just a little bit richer. So I'll get that mixed up. We'll have the flower nice and dry, and then we'll be doing these next stages. Okay, so going in with the orange, I'm going to begin with the sort of far side of that cup there, and the far side of that one there. So you can see it's a fairly dilute orange, and then this one in the middle here, you can see it's quite frilly. So what I'm going to do is sort of scribble the brush with a fairly sort of concentrated amount of colour, clean the brush off, clean it off even more, and draw that colour in to the middle. Meanwhile, add a little bit more colour to the top of that. There you go. And we'll let that dry. So, other things that we could be doing whilst we're waiting for that to dry. It's basically time for a little bit of detail. My favourite bit. So I'm going to take some burnt sienna and use my 4/10 brush to capture the crispy it's the sort of unfurled seed pod head, isn't it, really? And then I might take a bit of yellow ochre, just add that in as well, and then I can see that the lines sort of turn into a fine green, so coming upwards. And then I'll make just a little bit more of this sort of junction with that sap green. I'm going to also take a bit of sap green, almost use it as like a shadow colour, and send a few lines just down these stems. And then I can't believe we've got so far into this video and I've not even mentioned Payne's Grey. I'm going to get some Payne's Grey in with that green and add just that little bit to the darker little bulbous bits on the stem. And now I think I'm going to get the rigger brush, that feels more sensible. Except, you know what's not sensible is trying to pick up colour with the rigger brush. It's really silly. I don't know why I do it. Right, let's get a few lines. The control you get and the length of the brush stroke you get is amazing with a rigger brush. I'm just kind of scribbling with it, really. Okay, so I can come back up here and paint in another layer of the little orange cups. So I'm now just painting in the front half, and you can see just leaving a tiny little bit of unpainted space just helps define the front from the back. And then right in the center of these little flowers. I don't know if you can see that. We've got tiny little pollen, little anthers, which I'm just going to drop in there with some cadmium yellow. Now, the one other thing that I think is really important with a narcissus, with any kind of light bright flower, is if we actually have a good look at this, we can see, yes, we've got yellow petals, but there's actually lots of subtle, cooler, greeny blue, shadowy tones knocking about in all the lovely little textured bits, and we don't have any of that in there yet. So whilst that dries, I'm going to mix up a very dilute shadow mix. So that's burnt sienna and Payne's grey. Right now that looks really deep and dark, but if I just add more water to it in my palette, it really softens right down. Quite like the idea of it being on the bluer side of things. And maybe even a tiny bit of the green in there. But what we're doing is we're getting a very dilute tone ready in the palette, so that for the last stage, when everything's really dry, and I'm also going to rub out the pencil, we can add lovely little bits of detail with that shadow, and it's really going to bring it all together. Right, the pencil's all been rubbed out, so now it's time for me to start painting in some really subtle bits of shadow. So this, you can see how dilute this paint is. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that the shadow sort of sticks on the lower half of this flower, so there's not going to be too much on the top. But what we will do is, you see how the petals kind of fold over, they curl in on themselves. And then in the centre here, those little anthers that we could barely see, just doing a little bit of shadow like that just helps. There we go. And now the last thing I want to do is just get a little bit more red in the orange, making a nice concentrated colour, and just sort of get those a little bit more sort of frilly at the top. And there we have a lovely Narcissus on a dark background. So let's take off the washi tape so we can just see the piece unencumbered. So those paintings take a little bit more time with a little bit more process in them, but I just think how lovely. There you have a Narcissus. Perfect for January as the days are still a little dark, so things are starting to get lighter, and a lovely nod to the arrival soon of spring. Thanks so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed that one. It's so nice to be painting from seasonal flowers right in front of us once again. I want to say a massive thank you to my patrons for their support, because that support enables us to keep creating videos like these that everyone can enjoy. And if you enjoyed it, then hit the like button and comment below to let me know how you got on with that one. And of course, if you never want to miss another video, hit the subscribe button and the little notification bell, and we'll see you again next time.